How do you know that the content on YouTube is good? Or how do you know that the content on YouTube is actually published by a verified surgeon? And how do you know if that content actually is still maintained?
Welcome to PEMBA On Demand, where we spotlight physician leaders transforming healthcare through business innovation. In today's episode, From Scalpel to Startup, a surgeon's journey in business, leadership, and innovation, we sit down with Dr. Soliman, surgeon, entrepreneur, and University of Tennessee PEMBA graduate. He shares how early setbacks reshaped his approach to leadership, what it takes to build a startup as a practicing physician, and the business lessons that every clinician should learn before stepping into entrepreneurship. Welcome to PEMBA On Demand, Physician Leaders Making a Difference. I'm Chapin, your host. PEMBA On Demand is produced for physicians seeking professional development. We discuss a wide range of topics on the podcast, including successful innovations in a variety of healthcare disciplines, current issues in healthcare career development, and healthcare leadership. I will be interviewing physician leaders from the U.S. and from other countries, most of whom graduated from the Physician Executive MBA program at the University of Tennessee. The information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute professional advice. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the University of Tennessee or any other organization. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge and agree to these terms. Whether you're sipping your morning coffee, commuting to the hospital, or just looking for a dose of inspiration, we've got you covered. We hope you will take full advantage of these practical, insightful, and relevant discussions designed to help physician leaders get new and build upon existing leadership skills and perspectives. PEMBA On Demand will allow you to be an even bigger force for good in healthcare. Well, Mark, it's exciting to have you on PEMBA On Demand tonight. Welcome.
Thanks. Appreciate you having me, Norm.
Well, I've been looking forward to our conversation for quite a while now, so thank you for taking the time for recording this with me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So one of the problems I had, you wear so many different hats. It was really a challenge determining where to start our discussion, but I wonder if you could tell us about the startup that you're involved in right now. You co-founded Surgion, and maybe tell us a little bit about that and what inspired you to start that company.
Yeah, thanks. So Surgion is a surgical social networking and education platform. I co-founded it with two other surgeons. One's a trauma surgeon out of Ohio. The other one's a general surgeon out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. We founded it actually in the heels of the pandemic. And what we found was there was a paucity of community. Actually, there was plenty of community for surgeons online, but the challenge was there wasn't a safe place for surgeons to go to have protected and very private and very vulnerable conversations about surgery and burnout and finances or whatever it is. And a lot of the conversations had been done on Facebook or private Facebook groups and Twitter or YouTube or Instagram. And it became abundantly clear at those times that there was no platform that was purpose-built for physicians and surgeons to have very delicate conversations about patients and patient care related issues. And so we thought to create a safe space that surgeons can commune and have private conversations and also create community around the very issues that only physicians kind of know about. And therefore, Surgion was born. And it's been a really fantastic project. We have almost 32,000 users on the platform now. It's growing. We launched internationally a couple months ago, so we're globally available. And it's been an incredible roller coaster and wild ride just to see it kind of happen over the past few years.
So the inspiration come from a personal need that the three of you had, or was it colleagues that had approached you and you realized that there were other surgeons that had this need?
So I do a lot of surgical education. I am at my very core a surgical educator. I had been doing a lot of surgical education through YouTube. And lots of surgeons would come to me after I posted several dozens of videos on how to do a robotic colorectal surgery on YouTube with, hey, I'd like a little bit more coaching on this one topic, or I'd like a little bit more advice on, say, this specific topic. So we started having conversations, and I would maintain that community with just text messaging and maintain that community with email or whatever. It quickly became a bit overwhelming, and we didn't really know where you could find me, or you didn't know where you could find, for example, where's another content creator that's not a colorectal surgeon? How do you find a content creator that's an orthopedic surgeon, or a content creator that's a gastroenterologist, for example? So it became abundantly clear that we needed a way that we could have one place to house all the wonderful information that's available on the vast internet. And so right now, like if I asked you, where do you go to learn about gastroenterology content or orthopedic surgery content or trauma surgery content, I'm going to get disparate information. You're going to say YouTube. Okay, well, how do you know that the content on YouTube is good? Or how do you know that the content on YouTube is actually published by a verified surgeon? And how do you know if that content actually is still maintained? And so all these problems became almost prescriptive in a way, where these were thematic issues that existed with the social media of a few years ago. And so we basically took an audit of what we had existing within Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, all these things. And then we mapped these thematic problems to basically functions in the application. And that's how the platform of Surgeon emerged. So really, we were trying to solve the problems that we knew existed with ourselves as being surgeon creators and surgical educators, but also what our colleagues were telling us the problems that needed to be solved for.
So what is the business model for the company? How do you market it? Is this a monetized concept, or is this more of just a model that provides free access for the surgeons?
Yeah, so free access to surgeons is central. It's a central pillar to the application. Privacy also is one of our pillars of the application. But yes, we do monetize it. And so we have several, as we call, modules in the platform. One is a conference module. So we can host full-fledged surgical conferences in the platform. So we just got done hosting the Society for Robotic Surgery out of Strasbourg, France, just a few months ago. And we just got done hosting SAGES, another conference, big conference. And so we're constantly hosting conferences on the platform, and we monetize that conference platform so that conference organizers will pay us to host our conferences on Surgeon. We also, in Surgeon, have a community module where surgical societies, we have about 15 now, surgical societies can come and pay a nominal fee and bring their community into the platform and have private encrypted conversations inside the application. That's another vertical that we have. Again, education is at our core, so we run webinars on the platform. And much like a surgical conference, we take sponsorships. We don't allow sponsors to tell us what our messaging should be, but we allow them to align with the topics that we're covering. So for example, if we have a series on hernia surgery coming up, we're getting the world's experts in hernia to come to the platform to speak about it. We will align the sponsorship for that webinar with a hernia mesh company. We won't allow that company to tell us what the speaker should say, but because it's thematically aligned, then the sponsorship makes a lot of sense. So that's yet another monetization vertical that we have.
And you said you started this company sort of as we were coming out of the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, exactly. We began building it in roughly January of 2020. We launched it August of 2021.
Okay. And it's amazing to me to hear about how many different verticals that you have developed in such a short period of time. Were those things that the three of you had a pretty clear sense of when you started the company?
No, not at all, man. That's the one thing that we learned very quickly is whatever idea you have to start, it's going to be the worst idea ever, probably, once you try to battle test it. Actually, Surgeon first came to mind, and the idea was to use it as almost like a product placement app. So it first conceptualized as surgeons can post videos and they can tag a catalog of products. And that catalog of products could be linked in a video, and you can go look and see what other products does BD or what other meshes does Gore, for example, sell. That played out like a lead balloon when we pitched it to industry, because they didn't want any of their content on an app that they didn't fully control or support, whatever it is. So we pivoted from that very quickly to just an education-centric application. And then all the other verticals, conferences, private communities, and several others that we do came out of what our users were telling us needed to be done. I mean, so the conference application, I mean, candidly, I went to a conference and said, this app sucks. And I was like, I can build a better app than this. And so I went home, talked to the team, and within 6 months, we had our own conference app built out within SurgeOn. So it's really nice. You attend a surgical conference, and because you're already a member of SurgeOn, if SurgeOn's hosting the conference, one tab over from your social media feed, boom, there are your conferences. It just pops up in the application. And you can have conversation about the conference in SurgeOn on the social side of it, and also attend the conference in the application doing private messaging. You can watch the videos, you could chat, you can take polls, all that stuff happens within the ecosystem.
That's fascinating. And do you have to partner with someone to actually do the videography and get the content from the courses, or is that something that you provide to the sponsor of the courses?
Yeah, that's one thing we do not want to do is run the conference. No, we tend to work with societies or even industry in this regard that they are running a conference with their events team. And we certainly have lots of connections with different vendors, videography vendors or live streaming vendors that we can put them in touch with to help. Hey, you want live streaming? We got a great team that can do that. You want conference organization? We have a fantastic team for that as well. It's not us, but we work with them constantly.
So you have the app, and then you're also kind of a general contractor feeding them good connections and good collaborators for doing some of the other work of actually putting on the conference.
Yeah, exactly right. And as you're kind of seeing, Norm, like when you start getting into this world of a startup world, it's very easy. And I, as co-founder and CEO, like I feel like my biggest job is to make sure that the team maintains focus, because we can do anything and we can be asked to do a million things, and we do constantly get asked, build this button, build that feature, do this, and they're awesome ideas. But the biggest challenge you have is everything's a good idea. But if you're saying yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else. And so on the same token, you're saying no to something, you're saying yes to something else. So we have to be very deliberate with the verticals that we do enter. And we learned that the hard way early on, because it's exciting to see, well, this did not work. It's not sticky at all. We have to pivot quickly to this other thing, to option B or C or D or Z at this point. But we have to make sure that our eye is critically on the ball and that we don't take on too many things. And I think it's very common as a really enthusiastic founding team. And then when you start to feel like you have product market fit, you want to do everything, but you got to say no to things.
I think that is a real challenge. I find that's a problem just at work. I want to be so helpful to everybody, and I want to see so many things change that saying no is always one of my biggest challenges. And then all of a sudden I'm overpromising and underdelivering and it's not a good situation to be in. So
yeah, I completely agree with that.
So I'd like to talk with you a little bit. I know you have kind of some unique thoughts on how you structured the company. Can you talk to us a little bit about your decision to structure the company, the way you did, and why?
Yeah, so our parent company is Surgery Unified. Kind of, Meta has Facebook. SurgeOn is parented by a company called Surgery Unified. We were deliberate in that. So we started the company just as a partnership, and it became abundantly clear, this is before actually I came on the founding team, that it was not meant for scale. It was not meant for investment. It was not meant for share delivery. It was not meant for fundraising. So we quickly incorporated the company as a C Corp, quickly restructured the board to make sure that we had an odd number of board members. Previously, we had an even number, which made it very difficult to actually make any meaningful material decisions. We actually exited one of the founders because of this during this time, just to help kind of move things forward. And yes, the parent corporation is a C Corp. The reason we did that, again, is because we needed to be able to have a starting bank equity that the founding team take, but also the early investors could have their equity. But if we needed to, we could begin spin up, create, and sell shares as quickly and as often as we needed. So that was really what went into the C Corp decision. And I think the biggest piece of advice that I would have for any listener thinking about doing a startup is probably going to want to do that a bit sooner. Also, make sure that you have vesting mechanisms built in. I could talk about this all day. Mechanisms to which the founding team doesn't get all their shares or employees get all their shares right away. You want to make sure that there's a vesting schedule, meaning like if you're going to give someone, I'm going to make up a number, 1,000 shares to the company, they don't get all 1,000 shares on day one. They get, instead of 1,000 shares on day one, they get 1,000 divided by 24. So they're getting all their shares divided over 24-month aliquots. So just every month they're vesting a bit more. So if they become inactive, you can exit them from the company and not need to worry about wasted shares or there's promised shares that the person that was part of the founding team or part of the onboarded team actually did not deliver on what they said they would deliver.
So you mentioned the structure of the parent corporation. Is that the same structure of Surgeon itself?
Yeah, so Surgeon itself it's an app owned by the parent corporations. Yeah, it in itself doesn't have its own business structure. Now, but what we do have is we have Surgery Unified, the parent company, has Surgeon, the app, as kind of a business unit. Mm-hmm. We also have other business units. One of them is another app called Surgeon Scribe. I don't manage Surgeon Scribe. It's actually one of another surgeon-founded team, and they have a separate entity, and we have just basically a business relationship between the two. So although it rolls up to Surgery Unified, it's almost like it rolls up in terms of brand and white labeling and all that. And that's kind of how that is structured.
So is there any part of the corporation that is structured as a limited liability corporation, or have you gotten a trust structure of any kind in the corporate structure?
So not in Surgery Unified. I personally have my own LLC and I have my own C Corp and I have my own trust set up personally as Mark Soliman. So for that, I run also, because I was so big into surgical education, I did a lot of work in surgical consulting and coaching. So I found that at one point I was generating a decent amount of revenue. This is probably about 10 years ago. I started generating a decent amount of revenue on the side, and I was taking all this as just 1099 income. So I started reading and learning a bit more about this and found that I needed to start an LLC. I didn't know much about LLCs, but I started an LLC online on like sunbiz.org and found that just starting an LLC does not give you any protections. You really have to have the bylaws structured for the LLC to be a bit more intelligent. So we did that. And I had a bit more of an intelligent establishment of my consulting agency, the LLC. And then I found that I was making enough money to where I couldn't spend it all by the end of the year. And I wanted to do something to be a bit more creative about it. So I contacted a firm who does corporate structuring, and they advised that I create a C Corp as well. And that C Corp is technically a management corporation of my LLC. My LLC is what I get all my consulting income from. And then every year in December, before the end of the fiscal year, I pay a good chunk of money, basically whatever's left over, to my management company to manage my LLC for the next 6 months through the C Corp.
Okay.
And all those two entities, the LLC, which is taxed as an S Corp because I work in it, and the C Corp, which is a management firm, is both owned by a trust that I established later on in life.
Okay.
So that trust basically is where my whole life lives in. So my home, my investment portfolio, my LLC, Surgery Unified, my shares in the company are owned by the trust. Everything that I have is owned within the trust. So that way I will eventually die. My wife will eventually pass. And so the thing that I did learn as I was looking into kind of asset protection and estate planning is that the worst thing to do is to die. The second you die is the second all of your income and everything gets stuck in probate. What probate for the listeners is basically it's a judge or an attorney trying to dictate, what did you mean by this statement in your will? And so somebody has to interpret what your will means. That's the process of probate. And the worst thing you can do is have someone try to interpret what your quote unquote will was. So the only way to not do that is just to never die. The only way to never die is just to have an entity that can never die live in perpetuity. And that is indeed a trust. So that's why I started a trust. That I am a trustee of the trust. And my children, although they're 10 and 12 years old, they are also eventually to be trustees, like when they're 30. And my wife is a trustee of the trust as well. So we have it structured such that at certain milestones and after I pass and after my wife passes, there are certain things that get delegated to my father, my father-in-law, and my son and my daughter and so on. But it's all very prescriptive that a trustee executes and not a judge and not an attorney, which is what you don't want to in terms of probate. So that's kind of how I'm personally structured.
Now, from what I understand, there's different kinds of trusts. How are you instructed to structure your trust as a revocable trust, irrevocable trust?
Yeah, it's a living trust. The way mine is
Living trust.
mine is
Okay.
structured. Yeah, and I was at the judge at the advice of my estate planning attorney that we still work with pretty regularly. In fact.
Okay. Okay. Well, that sounds great. I think that's very interesting. I don't know that many physicians understand all of the different benefits, pros and cons of the different types of corporate structures, and especially as they're starting a business. So that was very helpful. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'll tell you, it doesn't make sense. I'll just give numbers because I feel like sometimes podcasts don't give real numbers. I think if you work for an ER or you work for a hospital and all you have is W-2 income, then it makes no sense to do anything like that because you can't decrease your tax burden at all.
Right.
But if you're doing enough side hustles, as I call it, and if you're generating more than $50,000 per year in side income, you probably should consider structuring yourself a bit. And then when it grows even beyond that, that's when you need to get a bit more creative with the structuring. And then we start having real estate investments and stocks and different portfolios and companies and all that kind of stuff. It definitely makes sense to start structuring yourself, especially as physicians, because we are high net worth individuals and we are big targets. So the more that we own under our own names, the more we are exposed to things. And the days of just, let me put everything in my wife's name, that doesn't really work because it's not very protected. But putting it in a trust and being a bit more structured, attorneys realize, oh, this person's quite structured. They have a lot of protections. They have a lot of LLCs that are basically keeping cement walls between them and the exposure that the rental property, for example, has. Then it will actually deter litigious and frivolous lawsuits from coming your way.
Where do you think, I'm going to pivot a little bit myself here. You've done a lot of pivoting. I'm going to pivot myself. Where do you think Surgeon or Surgery Unified is going to be in 10 years? What's your hope for the company in 10 years?
That's a difficult question. I say this all the time. And I was just having a conversation with the CEO of a Fortune 500 company 2 weeks ago, I think. I think like most startups, we are on a razor's edge of a multi-billion-dollar company and bankruptcy. So every single day, it's like, oh, what's going to happen today? Is it going to be a big deal? And so it's one of those where you're always fighting like the demons on either side of the angel here and the demon there. But in all seriousness, in 10 years, I am absolutely confident that Surgeon, we are growing at a hockey stick exponential rate at the moment. The amount of corporate sponsors and surgeons that are signing up for the platform and the revenue streams are dramatically increasing at the moment. And just the traction that we have actually do see us not just surviving, but incredibly thriving at the 10-year mark. And I don't think I ever want to go public with the company, simply because I think with that comes a lot of overhead, not like physical or like monetary overhead, but a lot of other things in terms of you have to answer to investors and we have to worry about like private equity and all the challenges that come along with that. I feel like I just want us to maintain the most dominant online surgical community that deals with the surgical patient. I feel like we're going to have by then 500,000 users is where I would love for us to be. And I would love for us to just continue growing at the rate that we are at the moment.
Oh, that's great. And I thought of this question just now, but is your overall strategy build it and sell it? Or do you plan to build and hold and maintain control?
Yeah, it's a good question. And then that's probably the one thing that myself and the founding team has not vacillated on since we started this. I don't know that there is a person we would be willing, or an entity that we would be willing to sell this to.
Okay.
Why that is because the majority of the app, actually all the app, there are colleagues on the platform. A lot of them know us personally, but they certainly have a parasocial relationship with a lot of the founders. And what we don't want to do is, for example, turn this into a Facebook where all we're doing is monetizing the users. And all we're doing is worrying about how do you squeeze every bit of revenue out of eyeball time and watch time and everything else. And similarly, selling the application to, for example, a med device company would actually pollute the application because right now it's as pure as it can be because it's owned by physicians. owned by physicians, built for physicians, and built for the surgical community at large. We feel like if we were to sell it to another entity that didn't have that exact same ethos, that it would actually damage the reputation of the app. And we're really into reputation and trust. Now, could an entity come along that can do a much better job at that and really enable us to trust them that they're going to do the right thing for our users? Maybe, but I don't know an entity that exists yet that would do that.
Okay. So this is build it and keep on plugging away at it and keep the mission and vision true to your founding principles.
Keep on plugging away, man. That's it for the time being.
That's very admirable. This podcast is sponsored by the Physician Executive MBA program at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville's Haslam College of Business. In less than 1 calendar year, this program will equip you with valuable business acumen and leadership development not found in traditional medical school curriculum. Are you ready to join the longest-running physician-only MBA program in the country and a network of nearly 1,000 PEMBA graduates? Visit tiny.utk.edu/POD podcast for information about this exciting opportunity. And now we'll return to the episode. There's so many people who run a startup with the idea that we're just going to build it to a certain point, get it to a certain valuation, and then sell it and walk away. And it sounds like, I'm impressed with your commitment to sticking with this.
Yeah. So for now, what I'm acutely aware of, though, is that what got us to this number of users and to this stage may not get us to 1 million users or 500,000 users and to several layers beyond where we are today. So there are certainly skill sets that we need to bring on that we don't currently have. So I absolutely am confident that we will likely expand the team with different skill sets, with different types of muscle that we don't at the moment have. But I don't at the moment foresee that we're going to pivot hard to actually selling the company. I don't feel that yet.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit with you. You've mentioned a couple of times that you've kind of been in the education business, that you started out doing YouTube videos on educating other surgeons on how to perform certain surgeries. When did you first start dipping your toe in that pool?
Yeah, it's probably been, I'm going to guess like 12, 13, 14 years ago, in that range. Funny story though, I train fellows for a living. And as I was doing robotic surgery, I found that, at the time, robotic surgery in colorectal had not been ubiquitously adopted. In fact, nobody was doing it. And so there's only a few of us around the nation teaching these type procedures and really getting technical refinement to the level that we had it. And so as my fellows were coming in to do training, I was telling them the same thing over and over and over again, the same anecdotes, the same jokes, pull there, don't pull there, don't do this, just do that. And so what I ended up doing is I actually recorded an entire course. I sat in front of a laptop and I narrated a PowerPoint with all the tips and tricks for the robotic operation that I was teaching. It was actually a robotic right colectomy, resetting colectomy. And I chopped up the videos into small segments and I sent it to my fellows. Every time they came on service, I would send them, watch this video on how I put my ports. Watch the next video on how I do this dissection. Watch that video when we're ready to do the anastomosis together. And what ended up happening was they were private YouTube videos that weren't publicly visible. Those private YouTube videos were shareable though. And so some of the fellows began to share them with not just the other fellows in the program, but with fellows all over the country. And I started noticing the view count went up, the distribution of the analytics started to change. And I asked around, what was going on? Like, yeah, we thought the videos were really good, so we shared them. So I just decloaked them and made the YouTube channel public. And then they tended to get a lot of attraction and a lot of traction and a lot of attraction. So I started producing them far more regularly and a lot more structure to the videos. And here we are. So we'll continue doing what we can.
So that sounds like it was just kind of serendipitous that you started getting that number of views just because of the quality of the work.
Yeah, it was a very humbling and illuminating experience. And the reality is those videos were exactly what I needed for me at the time. And I realized that there's got to be someone else out there that has these exact same questions that I have, that no one taught me. And I felt like in my own residency and fellowship training, as great as it was, there were deficiencies in the training. There were things that I wished as a very visual learner I got and I didn't get. So that was the content that I was really focused on creating.
It's an amazing story. I would love to go back and watch one of your early videos and see exactly what they were like and compare them to current state. I'm sure there's been quite an evolution of the process that you use.
The small evolution, yeah.
No, I know
it's always fun to go to surgical conferences. And I was just at the American College of Surgeons in Chicago 2 weeks ago. And it's just so great. People that I never would have met before just coming up, thanking me for the videos that I've produced, because I talk about pitfalls. I've made this mistake before. Please don't do this. You'll hurt your patient if you do that. Don't do this. And people are like, sure enough, you saved the patient's life of mine because you told me how to prevent that or how to fix that complication.
Wow, that's great. That's got to be very, very meaningful.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. You were in a private practice for a while. I know right now you're working for Advent Health, but what led to your decision to leave the private practice?
Yeah, it was a difficult decision actually at the time. I adored private practice. I love the independence. I love the ability to lead the group. I love the all the control that you had, the levers that we had to pull to be in private practice. The challenge with private practice, as I know many of my colleagues have today, is that we only have one source of revenue, which is basically the professional fees that we do. If I do an operation, I get the professional fees for that operation. I have to take that operation to the hospital. They get the facility fees, which are oftentimes multiples of what we did for the professional fee. So in private practice, we tried to take control of that. We actually had a surgery center where we had endoscopy in the OR. We owned our anesthesia team. We owned pathology. We owned physical therapy. We had a fellowship. We had literally every single thing you would ever need to be vertically integrated in colorectal surgery. And the unfortunate reality is, in Central Florida at least, private practice is almost impossible to thrive. You can survive, but you'll never truly thrive nowadays. Now, this is very different than, say, 20 years ago. And so we're just grinding very hard to continue doing what we were doing. And then every year that the overhead would go up, the expectations for the staff, they needed to get raises, the reimbursements would go down. And so you were working harder to make less money for the practice, to pay everyone more, and to deal with an imbalance of overhead. Right around this time, I began to, it was about 10 years into my career, and I started to have an itch to do something more than just take colons out. And it was at this time that I kind of yearned to be in more of a service-oriented position, that I could work on projects and I can work on something bigger than me, bigger than just the next colectomy, bigger than just the next week of work that I had to do. And I really wanted to be more in a clinical leadership role. And I was approached to take this chief of colorectal position within Advent Health. And honestly, it was really a blessing at the time. It was a really good time in my career, at the point at which the private practice was doing well, but I did not see a permanent future in it. And I felt like this is a really good time for me to make a pivot.
Okay. Now, were you already involved in some of the educational work that you had described earlier?
Yeah,
at that
I
time?
was. Yeah, I was. So probably about 3 to 4 years into my career, we ran a fellowship of 5 fellows at my former program. It was one of the largest colorectal training programs in the country. And people would come from all over the country to train with my team in colorectal surgery. And that really upticked after we began to adopt aggressively robotics into the practice. And so it was around that time that I started doing a lot more consulting. My LLC started up. I started doing a lot more traveling, a lot more lecturing, a lot more writing, a lot more publishing. So the educational side hustle, if you will, began to increase. The clinical business that I was doing back home also was increasing quite a bit. And then at the tail end of my tenure at my private practice is when conversations with my current team at Surgeon, we started having that we need to do something a bit more formal and to create an application around all this educational stuff that we're talking about. And so that's how Surgeon came into the mix.
Okay. So when did you transition into the role with Advent Health as colorectal chief?
Yeah, it was August of 2020.
Okay.
And so I began Surgeon as in private practice, it was like January of 2020. And then COVID hit a few months after that. And then we're having conversations at Advent Health kind of around that time. And And then I ended up eventually transitioned over to Advent Health August of 2020, and Surgeon launched a year later.
Okay. So I have this impression of you, a very accomplished colorectal surgeon involved in education for many years, different formats, fellowship, the videos, and then you transition into this clinical leadership role in 2020 or 2021. You completed your MBA in 2024. What made you decide that there was more that you needed in order to be successful? What did you expect to get out of the program, and why did you feel that 2024 was the right timing for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So because the private practice was failing, and I use failing the word lightly. I mean, we were still making making good money, but we didn't necessarily have strategy. We didn't necessarily have tactical approaches to many things. I felt like there was missing structure. So I got really interested in learning about business. And in fact, actually, fun fact, I hated business, like with the passion. When I first started my clinical practice in 2011, hated business. And I was like, I don't want to mess that stupid business crap and admin, that I hate it. I just want to operate. And then as I realized, like, you really have to have a good person sitting in that chair in the administrative office, there was a lot of opportunities for improvement in that role of how we ran the business of my private practice. So I became self-taught in a lot of things, self-taught in taxes, self-taught in accounting, self-taught in marketing, self-taught in strategy. And so I started looking, should I go back and get my MBA? And I kept kicking the can. I was like, not the right time, not the right time. And then by the time I said, yes, let me do it, my wife went back and got her doctorate in education. And there was no way she was going to let me go back and get my MBA as she went and got her doctorate. And the kids were finally in school. And so my wife let me get my MBA in 2024 after she completed her doctorate in education. And it's been an incredible blessing for the two of us actually to show our kids who are now 10 and 12 that you never stop learning. And even though I'm successful in certain things in my career, my wife is incredibly accomplished, but there were certain goals that we want to go back and learn. And PEMBA was that program for me, and the timing was perfect. And I tell many people this, that had I gotten my MBA 10 years ago, there's no way I would have gotten what I got out of it. I went in with a deep bench of trials, tribulations, failures, successes as well. And going into the program, I went to it with a very different lens. So as I'm attending the accounting lecture or marketing lecture or whatever it is, case studies in my own head as to what I could apply to that lesson to. And so timing was everything for me. And PEMBA was that program that really ticked off all those boxes.
That's great. I think it's interesting because there's many different schools of thought about what the best timing is for an MBA. And I think it's different from person to person. But my feeling is like yours. I completed my MBA much later in my career. And I just found that everything that came out of the lessons and the courses that I took, I could apply to a real world situation. By that time, it was very meaningful.
Because I remember throwing the idea around. There were a few of my colleagues or classmates rather in med school actually got their MBAs during med school. Mm-hmm. And going through PEMBA, I was like, there's no way I would have retained or appreciated a tenth of the information, or 90% of the information. I would have kept 10% of it at most if I had gotten it earlier in my career. So I mean, for the listeners out there, I think there is value. I'm sure you're going to get value no matter what. You're going to get something out of it no matter what and when you do it. It's what you make of it. But I really found I was super happy having done it a bit later in my career. But
so you have an amazing amount of things going on. You've got Surgery United, Surgeon app. You're still doing some of the consulting. You have this full-time role with Advent Health and Chief of Colorectal Surgery. What is your current balance like between surgery, your clinical role at Advent Health in the leadership position, running Surgeon, and how does that look? What does your day or work week typically look like?
Yeah. So it's a good question. And I'll tell you, it's every week it's a bit different, but everything that I do is at Advent Health is 60-40. I'm 60% clinical, 40% admin. Okay. And that is a firm thing. The time that I'm working at Advent Health from morning till night, and those are protected times. I don't mingle anything Surgeon into those hours. I'm very, very explicit about that. But I'm an early riser too, so I'm usually up 4:30 every morning. And so from 4:30 roughly to 7, I'm kind of working on myself, working out, fitness, but I'm also working on Surgeon related stuff. So I typically have meetings with my dev team or whoever it is in those early morning hours or in the evening hours and into the weekends. And so the most important thing that I have to say is that I have an amazingly supportive wife that allows me to do all these things. And now the most important thing is I have an amazingly accomplished operational and strategic team at Surgeon and sort of unified. So the day-to-day, I don't have to take care of anymore. So I have an ops team that manages all the operations, have a sales and marketing team that handles all that stuff as well. It wasn't always like that, but we've built an amazing team that I don't need to be as entrenched in the tactics minute to minute. I can deal with a lot of stuff in the mornings. I can do a lot of stuff in the afternoons, a text message here and there kind of sorts through things, but I don't have to worry about really, I don't deal with sales calls anymore or anything like that, which is incredibly helpful at the moment. And I'll tell you, there's nothing better than to see yep, we've aligned with these 5 new societies and these 6 new sponsors over the past week, and I had nothing to do with it, which is one of the most heartwarming things, that when I'm sleeping, the team is actually doing some amazing and incredible work.
That's great. Now, is your team a U.S. team, or are you using an offshore team? What works best for your situation?
Everything. Yeah, so we do it all.
Okay.
So half US based, half OUS. And so one of our VPs of operations and sales is actually in the UK.
Okay.
We have some of the team in India. We have some of the team also in the Philippines. We have some of the team, they're all kind of distributed all over the world. One thing I learned also, and we're all over the US as well. So the entire company was founded, and I never once met the founders in person. So the 3 of us, I think it took us maybe 2 years to actually see each other face to face. But we spoke multiple times per day, and Zoom calls and everything else. And it wasn't until the founding team met 2 to 3 years or 2 or so years into the company's establishment, the launch of the app, that we started broadening it out even more. And so we felt like it is a virtual company. We don't need to do anything with a physical plant.
So what was it that brought the 3 of, how did you connect in the first place if you didn't have a prior relationship?
And so that's the power of social media. So the story goes, Mario Leyba, who's a visionary, who's a general surgeon out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, met a guy named Jeremy Hefner, who's another visionary out of Lima, Ohio. They were talking and they started saying, let's build this app. And they started talking about what the app could look like. And they said, we need a guy that can make content to put on the app. So they called me because they knew me, or they knew of me through YouTube and Facebook and whatever else.
Okay.
And so that's how I got involved, was through a parasocial relationship that Hef and Mario had. They contacted me. I said, I'm not just making content for your app. I'll be a part of the app, part of the company. I'll come in as a partner. And then I came in as a partner, and and the rest is kind of history.
That's great. It's always just interesting how these relationships develop in this day and age.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you have any advice that you would give to other physicians who have been thinking as you did about the value of an MBA for several times, but have just never really pulled the trigger on it, or they just want to get more involved in the business side of healthcare.
Yeah. So as I said, I kicked this decision around for about a decade, truly. At the beginning of the decade, I was kind of like, I'll maybe think about it. But then I got really intense for the past 3 to 5 years or so until I actually pulled the trigger to do it. The biggest piece of advice I would say is I would just do it. Honestly, it's one of those things. It's, we have not been trained in medicine. This is a big failing of the medical education industry, is we are not taught anything about money. We're not taught about our worth. We do not speak finance language at all. We are recognized as being, and I hate to say this, but I'll be blunt about it, we're looked at as ignorant when you are in the halls of a C-suite. And so I, as a leader of a large colorectal group and division within Advent Health, if I were to step into a C-suite, which I do all the time, and I don't have an MBA behind my name, I just have MD, they assume I don't know what I'm talking about with respect to finance and tactics and strategy and all that. But I would have to start, and this wasn't intentional, I would have to start those conversations almost demonstrating I actually know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I felt like if I have an MBA behind my name, it almost gives me a certificate to where they now know, or they can at least imply I know what I'm talking about. And it's up to me to dispel that and actually let them down, so to speak. And so I guess my biggest piece of advice is if you do want to have anything to do with administration, you do want to have anything to do with leadership, and if you do want to have some control over your career, your reimbursement, your contract negotiations, then MBA, I think, is an indispensable instrument that we can all use. And that's why I was so keen to get it at the time I did, and so happy that I waited until I did to get that MBA, because I came with a lot of experience that I didn't have it. And so it was a very different lens that I looked through it when I did get to that point.
Was the financial language and understanding that you took away from PEMBA one of the more valuable takeaways, or were there other takeaways that you have relied on in the several years since you completed your MBA?
Yeah, I would say probably, the accounting and the accounting and finance side of it were huge. My job at the hospital system is strategy. So the strategy side of it was good to finally put some formal verbiage across. I feel like also the leadership and the coaching that we got at PEMBA was really, really awesome. The marketing was great too. Just the needs assessment of your clients and everything. I think those ladders and everything, all the exercises that we did were really important as well. But I will tell you this, for me, as you recognize, Norm, I have a lot of hats.
Yeah.
And so I was a bit schizophrenic during PEMBA, because at every single class, I'm looking through literally two lenses at every single time. I'm looking through my Surgeon lens. How can we grow Surgery Unified, and how can we grow the verticals that we're doing, but also the colorectal leadership lens as well. So everything at every point, I'm looking at both lenses, and how can I make sure that my Surgeon team is doing this correctly from a strategic perspective, from a finance perspective? Are we structured correctly? We have the user base segmented correctly for data acquisition and privacy laws and all these things. Same kind of questions, but with a different angle for job at Advent Health.
Great. Mark, I had so many memorable experiences at PEMBA. I wonder if you could share one of your more memorable PEMBA experiences.
It's tough. I'm thinking through this, and it definitely wasn't one memorable occasion. I think my favorite times, which I thought actually I was going to not like, were the RPs, or the residence periods. Being away from family, being away from my home and my wife and the kids and in work, I thought I was going to actually be miserable during that time. But those are literally the most memorable times that I had. All of the periods when we're studying late, when we're going to get sushi at night at the Dollar Sushi Bar, when we're going to get fried chicken, when we're going to, all the great things with my cohort, man, those are like some of the most memorable times that I had there. So for me, it's not like the academic memorability of it. It's actually the social side of it that me and all the 50 colleagues that I made, we became friends, and we're still communicate till today through our WhatsApp group. So it was definitely the residence periods.
That's great. Yeah, those were fun. Well, I think we've kind of run out of time here. I wondered if there's anything else that you'd like to share with the audience that we haven't had a chance to discuss.
No, I think the most important thing is that never stop learning. And I think that that's the most important thing. We're taught this in medical school to always be a lifelong learner. And for those viewers that are on right now that are thinking about doing an MBA, I really feel like this is one of the most impactful things that I was able to do in my professional career, to get me tapped on the shoulder to do bigger and better roles within the hospital system. And it's not just something for hospital work. Clearly, I'm not the most orthodox student that went through PEMBA in that. I had a side thing that I was doing at the time. I have a startup that's incredibly successful, and it's growing at a very humbling clip. And I think that, this is something that you have, I would highly, highly, highly recommend doing it. Reach out, have a conversation with any alum. I'm sure that we'll all be happy to have a conversation with you about it.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show, Mark. I really appreciate you taking the time. For those people in the audience, we will be putting some information in the show notes that you can use to get in touch with Mark. I'll put his LinkedIn site and information about Surgery Unified so that you can reach out if you have other questions. Thank you for joining us on PEMBA On Demand today. Dr. Soliman's journey reminds us that innovation often begins where resilience and vision meet, even in the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this conversation, please follow or subscribe to PEMBA On Demand on your favorite podcast platform and share it with your colleagues. You can find links to this and other episodes at tiny.utk.edu/PEMBA On Demand. Until next time, keep leading change and redefining what's possible in healthcare. Thanks for listening to PEMBA On Demand. We release new episodes bi-weekly, every other Thursday. You'll find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Castos. Hit follow or subscribe to us and add us to your library. If today helped you, please leave a quick review and share the show with a colleague. Questions or comments? Drop them on our YouTube channel, PEMBA On Demand. For episode links and resources, check the show notes and visit tiny.utk.edu/PEMBA On Demand, all one word. Take good care and keep becoming a bigger force for good in healthcare.